that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
that I will,
that I will,
well and faithfully,
well and faithfully,
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations, Councilmember Carly.
Thank you very much.
We are going to reconvene at what time?
Mayor Warner, we had a 10-minute break scheduled.
Right. So I was just wondering.
9:11.
Oh, okay. Good. All right. We will do that. We'll see everyone then. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. We now have a new council. And we have a new second meeting of the evening that I would like to call to order. I think the first item of business is the roll call.
Councilmember Monroe.
Aye. Here.
Councilmember Kick.
Aye.
Councilmember Carly.
I'm here.
Mayor Warner.
Here. It's going to take a while for us to get used to it. So the second thing I'd like to do is give a hearty welcome to Councilmember Kick. Welcome, and looking forward to working with you over the next few years. So
Thank you. I am beyond excited.
excellent. So then the next item is the Citizens Forum. Do we have any comments on any of our input channels? And at this point, we'll have Marie Weber kind of handle the ins and outs of this. At the moment, I've got some new glasses. They're not completely working well, so I'm not going to be able to track everybody on the side. So Marie, if you could handle the Citizens Forum, I would appreciate it.
Yes, Mayor Warner. As with the first meeting, we will conduct the public comment in the same method. Tonight we'll be using the Zoom platform. Members of the public can participate by submitting written comments through Zoom Q&A feature or provide verbal comments using the raise hand feature. If you are calling in, please use *9 to raise your hand. When participating in this portion of tonight's meeting, one comment may be given per person, per item. Comments should be no more than 500 words or 3 minutes. If you submit multiple comments for a single item to the Q&A feature, the last comment will be read into the record and all other comments will be added to the final meeting record. The mayor will announce the conclusion of the public comment period after statements are read or voiced into the record. Mayor Warner, we have received public comment over Zoom Q&A and we have a hand raised.
Okay, would you proceed then with that, please?
City Clerk's office, please read the comments received over Zoom Q&A.
This comment is a duplicate from the first meeting. It's from Tri-Valley for Black Lives. This is a public comment from Emily Wilson, a community advocate and one of the founders of Tri-Valley for Black Lives. I wanted to begin my comment by stating that I'm a huge supporter of the Equity Inclusion Working Group and their desire to help a better, more inclusive Livermore for all people, races, genders, sexualities, abilities, and religions. With what has transpired this weekend, I became aware of the need for more clear communication between the city and its constituents. Misinformation spreads fast, and it was difficult to put out the fire when there wasn't a clear response to the issue. The meeting notes from the subcommittee were taken entirely out of context, and the intent behind what the group was doing got lost after the impact it had on some of our residents. I'd like to close out by thanking our city leaders for taking the first step towards creating a more equal and just future for all, because Black Lives Matter. And that concludes the Q&A.
City Clerk's office, please announce and unmute participants who have raised their hand.
The first public comment will be from Judy Xavier. The next will be from Jay Faith. Judy. Judy, we cannot hear you. Okay, you can go ahead and put it in your comments in the Q&A field. We'll move on to the next. This is Jay Faith.
Thank you. My comment is with regard to the equity and outcast group. This indoctrinated Marxist group way of thinking seems to be infecting this council, as represented by the most recent election of Brittany Kick, who supports the Marxist front group, the BLM, which has actually killed more unarmed Black men in the last 6 months than law enforcement has in the last 10 years. The fact that facts don't care really about your feelings, and we, the community of Livermore, are disgusted by this new committee agenda and demand that it be disbanded immediately for its systemic, racist, hateful agenda, whose goal is to divide the community along the lines of some sick, disgusting ideological groupthink. We've read your response to the community's disgust with this committee, and we do not accept your attempt to gaslight us. We know exactly what your goal is, and we reject it and demand that this committee be disbanded in shame. We see that your goal is to divide the community, and we want to once again say that there is no systemic racism. The only systemic racism is coming from the committee itself. Thank you.
Next is Hayden Sidden.
Hello. Well, first, I'd like to congratulate Mayor Warner and Councilmember Kick on their swearing-ins tonight. I can't wait to work with them as a member of the Equity and Inclusion Working Group, and it's going to be a great 2 years for Livermore, so congratulations to them. The reason I raised my hand was because of the last comment. The Equity and Inclusion Working Group is working to eliminate racism within Livermore. I didn't know anti-racism is a Marxist ideology, but we're working to end that, and we want to make this a more inclusive and welcoming city for everyone. Thank you.
And that concludes the raised hands.
Okay, is that all of the public comment?
City Clerk's Office, I believe we've received one additional comment over Zoom Q&A.
This comment is from Nicole Thomas. In case the council has not had a well-calibrated pulse on the whole community, Jay Faith is not alone in her thoughts. And that concludes the comment.
Okay, that's everyone.
That is all the comments received, Mayor.
Okay, want to thank everyone for submitting their thoughts. And with that, I'll close Citizens Forum. And now we're on to matters for consideration. And the first item is 11.1, appointment of vice mayor. So staff is recommending that I appoint a vice mayor for the period of 2020-21. And the person that has accepted being vice mayor, and you can reaffirm it, is Councilmember Monroe. Is that correct?
Works for me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We've, I think you referenced it earlier. We've had spirited conversations, and I think they've been very spirited at times, but I think we've learned a lot from each other, and I appreciate it and looking forward to working with you in your role as vice mayor.
And I agree completely. And yes, I think even today, spirited, but always productive.
Yeah, yeah, gets the adrenaline going always. So, so now I know I skipped a staff report because I didn't see it on my page here. Is that okay to have skipped that? Are we all right here?
Yes, Mayor, that is your appointment.
Okay, so now we're on to discussion and direct at 11.2, discussion and direction regarding filling of the city council vacancy. And is there a staff report? I'll let you guys say it at this time.
Honorable Mayor, your city clerk, Marie Weber, will give the staff report. This is Mark Roberts, your city manager. Congratulations, Honorable Mayor, and new council member Kick. Madam City Clerk.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This is your city clerk, Marie Weber. At the general municipal election on November 3rd of this year, Councilmember Bob Warner was elected mayor, leaving a vacant council member seat that expires on November of 2022, with the swearing in generally taking place in December. California Government Code Section 36512 requires the City Council within 60 days from the commencement of the vacancy to fill the vacancy by either appointment or special election. The 60-day period to appoint or call for a special election commenced upon the administration of the oath of office to Mayor Warner at tonight's meeting and will expire on Friday, February 12th, 2021. The last City Council vacancy occurred in 2011. At that time, City Council elected to fill the vacancy by appointment and ultimately selected a new council member. If the council chooses to move forward with an appointment process, public meetings to screen, interview, select, and appoint a new council member would be scheduled. A proposed application form and recruitment timeline were included in the agenda packet. The sample application is a download of the application created in the city's new boards and commissions software and displays both fill in the blank option and drop-down boxes for applicants to complete. As directed by City Council, staff also solicited application questions from the public and has provided those questions for City Council's consideration. If the council chooses to move forward with a special election, the special election is required to be held on the next regularly established election date, not less than 114 days from the call of the special election. The next regularly established election day would be November 2nd, 2021. The estimated cost to conduct a special election would be $19 to $21 per registered voter, totaling between $1.1 and $1.2 million. A person appointed or elected to fill a vacancy holds office for the unexpired term of the former incumbent. Under the term limits established by the Livermore Municipal Code, the council member vacancy that results from Mayor Warner's election is less than 1/2 of a term of office. Therefore, appointed council member could still be eligible to serve 2 full terms following their appointment. As a correction to the staff report, whether the vacancy is filled by appointment or by special election, the individual could be eligible to run for office in 2022 and 2026 by representing either District 1 or 2. Staff is requesting direction from the City Council on whether to begin the recruitment process or call for a special election to fill the vacancy. If the council selects the appointment process, staff also requests direction regarding questions to include on the application. With that, I'm available for questions.
Okay, are there any questions from the council regarding this?
I have 2 questions, Bob, if I can ask those. So Marie, did you just say that they could only represent District 1 and 2 if they chose to run again, or could they potentially run in, 2024 to represent 3 or 4?
So at the next regularly established election, we will be moving to Districts 1 and 2. They could wait an additional 2 years off of the council and run for Districts 3 or 4.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I had that correct. And then I had one more thing that I wanted to say very specifically about this process. First, I want to start with, thanking everybody for the opportunity to serve that voted in the election, and to encourage people to apply if we do choose to do this. Reminding everybody that the only requirement that we need to serve in this public elected office is to be a registered voter and to be a resident in Livermore in either the district that you live or serve, renter, homeowner, unhoused community member, as long as you can establish residency, whether you're 5th year in town or 5th generation Livermore resident. We are happy to live in a country where we can do that. So I encourage anybody to apply to this position, no matter what their status, as a longtime resident or a new person who chose Livermore as their home. I would suggest that we appoint this because it's going to save significant amount of dollars. I believe it was what, $1 million, Marie?
Between 1.1 and 1.2 million, yes.
Correct. That's all. Thank you.
We need to make a motion to that effect.
I believe that that's the easiest way to get through this is first let's decide that and then go to the other process.
Yeah, so I'll move that we appoint a new member of council.
I'll second that with the caveat that isn't that why we had the question? Shouldn't we decide to do that at the November 23rd meeting?
Just hang on a second. Well, it's not it's a different we now. And
I see. Okay.
I think we set this up, but it may be possible. I don't think it'll hurt to reaffirm that that's our process, but we can check with the city clerk and the city attorney. Do we need this, or have we already decided?
So Mayor Warner, this is your city attorney, Jason Alcala. No, the city council has not decided made the decision whether to appoint or call for a special election. At your last city council meeting, there was direction given to the staff and the councilors to prepare for it, but no direction has yet been given.
Well, thank you. That was my understanding. So I think I've heard a motion and a second. And any further discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Monroe,
Aye.
Councilmember Kick,
Okay.
Councilmember Carly,
Aye.
and I apologize, Vice Mayor Monroe. Mayor Warner,
Oh, yeah, I should change my label. I'll say yes.
Oh, me too.
Okay, so let me I'll back that up. Well, I got to find my keyboard. There we go. Okay, thank you. I mean, as I say, it'll take a while to get used to it. So with that, we've decided on the appointment process. And we have the application. I think our next order of business, and I want to get guidance on this from the staff, but I believe is for us to agree on the time frame, given the order of the attachments. So if we could look at attachment 2 for the timeline, and would like to see if we can get agreement on that as being the appropriate timeline. Anybody have any discussion or want to make a motion on that being the timeline?
Do we need to make a motion on the entire item or each individual attachment?
I think my preference is that we just agree on the timeline and then, just each piece, because it's the last piece on the application is going to be complicated, and a lot of times we forget what we're doing, and so I think it's easier to just step through this in order if we could.
So I'll move to accept the timeline.
I'll second.
Great. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Kick,
Aye.
Councilmember Carly,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Monroe,
Aye.
Mayor Warner.
Aye. Okay, with the next we come to the application and the questions. And we have two parts here. We have an example of the application, and I don't know if we need to make any adjustments to that, but I would first say we don't going to do this in motions at this point, but I think we could, if we could focus the conversation first on the application that we saw, which was attachment 1. And then second, we'll go to what the additional questions are. So does the city clerk want to say anything about the application that we saw in attachment 1?
Mayor, the application provided in attachment 1 was what was requested in the recruitment in 2011. So we took those questions and input them into the city's new boards and commissions software. As you could see, there are some questions there where it says City Council not submitted. Those are actually drop-down boxes and fill in the blank options that residents will have an opportunity to fill out when they go to the website.
Can I ask why, what's the relevance of the district that you live in?
Given the new software, we felt that offering demographics so that the council would be able to see how not only the council, but also boards and commissions are broken up across the city, and where you are receiving representation might be important to you. So we are asking some additional questions as we perform recruitments.
I guess I don't think it's relevant, but I guess I'll hear what other people think.
To clarify, Marie, this application is not just for the city council appointment. The software that we're using is an application that anybody uses when they apply for any board or commission.
Actually, this one is specific to city council. We do have a template which includes the what district do you live in, and that question is included across all boards and commissions. But the software is very flexible and we can easily take questions on and off at your direction.
But the purpose of that district question was specifically originally for the boards and commissions?
Correct.
Yeah, but the title says City Council appointment application.
Yes, yes. I think the software was created, this question was created with the boards and commissions in mind. I think, I don't have strong feelings whether we keep it or not.
Okay. Vice Mayor Monroe, do you have any comment on the application itself?
I think the application's fine. I'm sitting here thinking about the district question or not. I rather like it simply for the idea that people live in different areas in town. Those areas are quite different, or can be, and that's good. I think that's good information to have. It's certainly not sufficient.
You can find that out from the street address.
That is true.
So I don't get it.
So
I don't have a strong feeling. You know, sure.
So
if you feel strongly about it, it's not something I'm going to the mat on.
I don't think it's relevant. Okay. And I think as long as it's an at-large position, and that's what we've said, then the issue of district is not relevant.
Okay. I don't quite know how to put this. I guess what I'm wondering about is going through each one of these things. The things that seem very relevant are the fact, you know, what is your participation in civic life? What do you think your qualifications are? What are your interests? I'm wondering about years residing in Livermore. How much do we care about that? What does that tell us?
The council member Kick's point, that shouldn't be relevant.
I don't think it should be relevant. I think that no matter how long you've lived here, whether you chose to live here 5 years ago or your 5th generation, you should absolutely be welcome to serve on council. I think sometimes it's used as a deterrent to new people that might want to come in, that they haven't been here long enough to have earned this spot.
Similarly with education and employment, I actually think all of that is interesting information in terms of understanding who the person is. But I'm not sure it's relevant for the job that we're being asked to do.
Education and employment is not relevant?
Might not be.
Maybe.
I'd like to know.
Sure.
But imagine that I'm a high school graduate who has attended every council meeting, read, self-educated, and is participated in all kinds of amazing ways, versus somebody with a PhD who's done nothing.
Right.
So I think all of these things are interesting ways to understand who the person is. But if I'm looking at this and trying to think about what actually matters for who the person is for this job, I don't know.
Could we potentially, it says summarize your participation in civic or community activities. Could we, instead of saying, what is your education or employment, employer, ask just more details about what they think is relevant experience?
If I may, I think that's a very interesting way to phrase it. Then it's letting the person respond with what they think matters. And that, so I kind of like that thought. Councilmember Carling, what do you think?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
So if I can summarize what I've heard so far, and then we can maybe move on.
I have one more thing.
Sure.
Okay. I have two computers in front of me and it's confusing me. I would like to add next to or under where it says first name, middle initial, and last name, just a simple line that says pronouns underneath. For anybody that doesn't know, pronouns would be she, her, he, him, they, them. And this would not be any sort of litmus test to say we're only going to have female identifying people in office or male identifying people in office. The reason pronouns are important is because whether the person is in the room or not, correct pronouns should be used and respected. And as we will be receiving these applications, they will not be in the room for me to ask, hi, Bob, nice to meet you. What are your pronouns so I can refer to you correctly? This would be our opportunity to know that information. So I can say, so Trish, I think that Marie would be a great applicant. She is someone that we should interview. If Marie's pronouns were not she, her, it would be disrespectful to her to refer to her in that way.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Carling, do you have any comments on that?
No, it's okay with me.
Okay, that sounds good. So if I may, at this point, anybody else have any other suggestions? We can maybe summarize for staff what we think we're doing. Is that okay? So starting at the top, we'll add the line for the pronouns. We will drop the district question on this one. I think it's certainly relevant on future ones, but this is a transition time, as has been pointed out. This is open to anyone in any place in Livermore, as long as they're a resident of Livermore. I've heard that we will, in terms of their education and work experience or whatever, make it more general to what experience would you like that you would like us to consider. And that we've also decided to drop the question about how long a person has resided in Livermore. Did I capture it all?
I think so. I want to just go back to that question about how long someone's resided in Livermore. The only reason I actually think something about your engagement in Livermore needs to be said. If you walk into town and you know nothing about the city and you say, you know what, I'm here to serve because I've had experience in 5 other cities and I'm going to be great, I'm not interested. And that maybe will come up in other ways. But is there some way, not necessarily to say you've lived here 5 years or 6 generations, but to address that question of, and maybe it's just addressed in what work have you done in the community? Maybe that's where it shows up. Never mind.
And that's the last question. And although I do think we have to be careful here, because if we said the years in Livermore don't matter, but now we're saying you have to have years of service in Livermore, that's kind of inconsistent. So I think we leave it at what does the person think is relevant, and their participation in the last one, civic or community activities, including years of service on that. I'm not going to restrict it from other places, really. So, because that's where you can have someone who's experienced from another place who can just have moved here and be qualified. So I think it's, let's let the applicant decide how they want to answer this. And
fair enough.
Does that make sense? So I would ask staff, are we clear enough on this application? On this part of it, we're going to go to the questions, the other additional questions next.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. So now let's go to attachment 3, if we may. And I would like to make the following suggestion as to how we do this. Is that, I think we all understand that we can't have this many questions, right? But I think as we also have looked at this, we see that some of the questions are actually duplicative, at least on the ones that were generated by the council. And I'll give an example of that in a second. But on the second part, we have the residents' questions, and Vice Mayor Monroe has pointed out, and we had a prior discussion on this, that those actually fall in groups, and that we might think about it in terms of what's the concept that's being asked here, and condense this into a set of questions that touch upon the things that we think are most important here, but we don't need this many questions on that. So is that, and then I'll say the second thing is, if we can agree, let's have that kind of conversation, if that makes sense. We can talk about first on the top part, how we might condense those questions, and then we can think about the categories that came from the residents. And I would like to suggest that we aren't tonight going to attempt to wordsmith all of this at this hour, because that doesn't work. I don't even know if one person could do it, but certainly it gets worse the more people you get to it. So I would like to request that 2 council members volunteer to be a very short-term subcommittee. And after we have this conversation tonight, draft the questions that the final version we want to submit to the city clerk for then letting the application be released on Wednesday. Does that, so with that, before we get started on this, do we have 2 people that are willing and able, have the time to work basically tomorrow to finalize the question set based on our conversation?
Sure, I could do it.
I'm happy to help as well. But I do have one clarifying question before I commit myself.
Okay.
So are you suggesting that we just pick what we have here and say, we're going to ask this topic, this topic, this topic, and then we wordsmith it later?
Right.
Okay, yes, I'm happy to do that.
Excellent. Does that work for you, Vice Mayor?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what I'll do at this point is, just you guys know, you're the very, very short-term temporary subcommittee to get this done tomorrow. So with that, that's the spirit of the conversation. I'd like to open it up just for example on the first set of what we might consider, and then we can go from there. And I'll let somebody else do a similar thing that I'm gonna do on the top section, on the bottom section. So let's go to the top section and think about what we have here. And as I look at these questions, I see, upon joining the council and what would be your priorities, as very similar to what issues do you believe are going to be the most important for the council to deal with over the next 5 years? What should the council proactively, do to prepare? So I think those are basically very similar and could be combined into one question. Yes, and Marie just suggested that she share her screen. That was a great idea, Marie.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, great idea.
Back and forth between my computer screens.
Okay, so thank you. So 1 and 5, I would request, and if we're all in agreement, they could be logically combined into one good question.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think 2 is standalone, as is. And then if we get to 3, sort of 3, 4, and 6 are very similar in content. I mean, the only difference between 4 and 6 is 5 years versus 6 months. But the idea that I see in those questions are, have you been paying attention, basically, and do you agree or not with what's happening?
Can I agree with your point. I'd like to get some consensus from the council as to what number we pick between 6 months and 5 years. I think one of the challenges of 6 months is that we've been under COVID for longer than that. And that's a very different environment than, what we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. So I don't know that we should go back 5 years, but I think it should be longer than 6 months. And I guess I'm looking for some other thinking around this as to
So in my traditional habit, I will just say both and. And what I mean by that is, hey, and I might as well own it at this point. What I mean by that is that one question, one speaks to the long term and one speaks to the short term. And both of those things are important. So in the short term, what I want to know is, have you been paying attention to what the city has been doing under COVID? And in the long term, I want to know, have you been paying attention to what some of the longer issues have been? Do you know what the history is? Regardless of whether you've lived here for, again, 5 years or 60 or 6 generations, what I want to know is, do you understand what issues have shaped Livermore in one way or another? But I think those can be asked in one question as long-term and short-term.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's important that we clarify more than 6 months, whether it's in the application or in our interview process. So the person understands that this is going to be a rough 2 years as we're coming out of COVID, and so that they have a pretty clear understanding of what the current situation is. That may or may not necessarily need to be on the application, but maybe we consider it for, an interview, understanding COVID implications on council procedures.
Right. So if I may,
the council procedures are sort of dictated by the state and the county. I mean, we're not doing this.
Yeah, I know we're not doing it for fun, but just so people know.
Either.
We don't have a lot of latitude in some things, but I think it may be, again, we may be getting a little too granular here for this question, and we should be leaving it to the applicant. I think that 6 months is too short a time frame. I agree with that. 5 years is too long. I'll leave it to the subcommittee to come up with a year and a half or 2 or whatever, that kind of thing in between. But I'd like to say this: my understanding of that question, or one way to interpret it, is, in many dimensions. One, has the person been paying attention? Second of all, how do they think about issues, right? And that's basically it. What do they think is important and how do they think about issues? And have they been paying attention? Those are the aspects of that I think are underlying the question. And you can tease that out with the right phrasing.
Okay.
So what I see with respect to that thing, I think if we can agree that there are 3 questions there. Okay, so then can we move on to the resident questions?
Yes.
Okay, who would like to discuss that?
Well,
Yes.
go ahead. What was that?
No, I thought you were the one that grouped it, so I was waiting for you to lead us.
Sure. Okay. So I think that there's a question about the pandemic, which I want to leave aside. Then there are a set of questions about which effectively equity and diversity in one way or another, and those include 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 looks like we've already covered it. Perhaps also 8. 9 is slightly different in that it's around communication, but it's related. But 10 is also another one around how do you think about and engage with the different people in Livermore. I'm not sure they can be all. I'm not sure that's one question. It's probably 2, but it's probably not more than 2. It's a second question, second category is around communication. That's number 9. And I think number 9, number 15, probably 16. Those are questions around not reaching out and pulling people in. So it's both passive and active engagement with residents of the community. A third category is around climate change and how do we think about climate change and what do we do about that? So that's 13 and 14.
Could I just real quickly interject? That climate change is one of the potential answers to the top section. What do you think are the important issues? So I don't think I would leave it. I just want to suggest that any particular topic like that, carbon neutral, climate change, growth within the city limits, I would leave it as the person to raise that in the upper.
That's fine. What I'm doing isn't actually, I'm just trying to find the categories.
Right,
So,
no, but I was just trying to also, because you mentioned one of the categories was already covered in some of the other parts. I was just trying to say is that,
fine. I mean, I hadn't thought about it that way. Sure, I don't have it's that appears there. I hadn't thought about it being covered in that way. You're correct. So in that case, I wonder if. Okay, so so you're actually raising another question, raising this in a different way. So questions that might be covered, that could be 1. It could be 2. I mean, those are issues that the city is currently dealing with right now. And then 11 really has to do with, 11 and 12 are land use questions. So now I'm a little bit confused, I have to say, because all of these could be viewed as questions people could answer for priorities.
Can I
the reason I interjected, and I'll let you go in a second, is that we have a chance to have the general question where they tell us something, but we have numerous topics. And so one of the things we're trying to decide here, is there a particular topic that rises to the level of we're not going to wait for them to raise it. We want to make sure we've got it. Not all of these fall into that category, but let me say that. Bob, go ahead. Sorry.
Is there a sense of how many questions we're shooting for? I mean, that might help us. I mean, if we end up with, say, 3 questions generated from the 6 that are at the top, how many more do you think are reasonable to ask?
Good question. When I asked staff that earlier, 6 total.
Okay.
Mhm.
I was
That's my
thinking 5 or 6 at the
take.
most, so that's
Yeah.
okay.
That's why I was trying to not go into a lengthy detail here.
I get it. I think having a number to kind of shoot for, get close to would be helpful. So thanks.
I'm concerned that we have a list of 18 questions from residents that we've asked for, and I think we have an obligation to make sure that we have some of those represented in one way or another. If they're only a list of people who have raised these questions, think about them.
It's not 18. I think we can maybe strike one.
Well, we could take out the last one, but although thanks, whoever wrote that.
So here are my thoughts on that. First, I do think it's important that we recognize the fact that people brought up these things. They think they're important in their council member. However, if we look back at what happened in the previous meeting, people are very concerned that the council is trying to have some sort of litmus test on who is allowed to serve and what beliefs they must hold. And when we ask a question like, do you believe the COVID pandemic is real? Someone might take that as a litmus test where if they answer no, we are saying you may not serve. If they say, do you believe systemic racism is real? And we say no, that is maybe us having a litmus test saying you may not serve. And I don't think that's smart. And I don't think that is how we should start this application process. If we move towards rather than what do you think, but how do you think and how do you make decisions? How do you collect new information? How do you change your mind? Have you ever been wrong about something? Something that was very useful to me in getting here was asking people 2 questions. What's the best thing you've ever done in your life? And what's the biggest mistake you've ever made? And some people gave me 10 mistakes, and some people told me they've never made a mistake in their life. And I think that tells you a lot about how a person thinks in a different way than giving them these, do you believe the way I believe, types of questions. They could be perceived in that way.
I like that.
I love it.
And the thing is, the good thing about this job is that you don't have to ask people, what they think they've done wrong. They'll tell you what we've done wrong.
That never happens.
Let's see, I'd like to speak to Tricia's point. I think you're right. And we asked the people to contribute, but on the other hand, I suppose if people are watching tonight, they can see the list of questions that we've received or go on the website and see that. So I do think it's incumbent upon us to rephrase some of these questions in a way that, is true to the fact that they've provided the information to us. But I hope that the residents understand that these are suggestions, and we're going to use that as a means to create the questions that we're actually going to use. I mean, to Brittany's point, number 2, for example, what's your vision to keep Livermore on its path to a more equitable, diverse city? I think is a reasonable start to ask. And I mean, again, we don't want a litmus test to Councilmember Kick's point about, do you believe in systemic racism is real or not? But I think the second part of that very submission is an interesting question and is different than any of the ones that City Council.
Right. And even if we expanded that to rather than what is your vision to keep Livermore on its path, because that is assuming that they think we're on a good path. So let's say, what is your vision of an equitable, welcoming city? If you look at our mission statement, I wrote it down somewhere earlier today. It says something about, this is going to bother me that now I don't have it in front of me. Someone screen share our mission statement. Goodness gracious. Basically, it says something in our mission statement, very specific about moving forward in our community. Mark Roberts, what is our mission statement? This is driving me.
I am sorry, Councilmember Kick, I don't have that one in front of me.
All right, I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna find it. It says,
Excuse me,
I texted
Councilmember-
somebody today. Okay, here it is.
Councilmember Kick. This is Doug Alessio, your Administrative Services Director.
Thank you, Doug.
You're welcome.
To the rescue.
The city's mission statement is, the city of Livermore provides efficient, attentive, and courteous service, promotes economic vitality and innovation, and works to enhance the community and quality of life for Livermore residents.
Yes, that. So rather than saying, let's keep on our path, we could ask something like, what is your vision to meet our mission as a city, right? Our mission is to enhance the quality of life. What does enhancing the quality of life for our residents mean to you? And then they get to self-define what that means without someone feeling like we're trying to push them in any one direction.
Right. Did you write that down?
Sure, it's right here. Don't worry, we'll talk about it tomorrow. And we also have.
You're muted. Mayor, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm saying I think that's very good. I think it allows you to envision that many of these questions that we see before us are in that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is just the application. We still have interviews, and there's an opportunity to maybe work some of these questions into interviews if we feel that we need to after the applications come in. I don't think by not taking all 18 residents will be upset, because that's a long application. Not as long as an election, but in a long application. And so rather than saying we're not going to ask these, maybe saying we're going to fit as many as we can in, making them as open-ended as possible. Open-ended questions, I think, are the best choice, and that we may ask some of these others in interviews. And if anybody is listening tonight, they would be like, oh, I better pay attention to those for interviews potentially.
So if I could, I just want to make sure I understood what you said, that the way you phrased it, what would you like to do to, what would you recommend to enhance our mission statement, achieve our vision? That takes care of a great deal of these specific questions, but that some of these questions that we see before us that are detailed may appear when we orally interview the people. Is that what I heard?
Yep.
Yes, and from my understanding, we will have another opportunity to meet to choose what those interview questions would be in closed session, correct?
No. I think, I don't know that we have another opportunity. I think, so that's a good question. I would like to turn that back to staff. When do we, I think right, because we're going to, yes, we will have that opportunity, and that would be the first meeting in January.
Right. And that
Right.
would not be open session, because we would be discussing the questions for interviews, and obviously we want those.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, this is your City Attorney, Jason Alcala. The process to develop your interview questions, we have to research that. I'm not aware of a basis right now that would allow you to go into closed session to develop those questions for your interview collectively. If you're the ones you're actually going to ask during the interview process itself. The opportunity for closed session is a very narrow exception to the law.
Okay, so if I could suggest this, because thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Kick, for bringing that up. It's a little awkward, because obviously if we then also do the oral questions, then there's none of that. It's different than what we've done in the past. But if I could add this to the conversation, is that, in normal good practice in employment, everybody is asked the same questions, but that this isn't, talking with the city attorney, this isn't exactly that, because we're really trying to explore whether the person is the best we can find for a council seat. So we're not restricted on everything being exactly the same. So I think the position we're in, and you know, staff or anybody else can weigh in on this, these questions that will be developed based on what we were seeing, and if you could put the questions back, that would be good, are going to be fairly exhaustive. There's more questions here than we can actually get through. And that knowing this conversation, knowing these questions, and knowing the way you guys are going to consolidate these thoughts into some generic launching questions, that these form the, you know, sort of the area that we might talk about. But I think we're also able to, depending on if somebody says something that's of interest, we can pursue that line of inquiry. Mm-hmm. So I think we're just going to, the situation we're in with being able to develop these questions, I think that's part of it. The other thing that I think we've had in the past, frankly, is that staff has put together questions for the, when we do the advisory body. So is there any, does it make any sense for a list of questions to be generated by staff, or is there an opportunity? And that's the other question. Otherwise, I think we got enough questions, and I think we have enough latitude, but I think we also know that we need to be as consistent as possible in order to give a reasonable comparison, because that's kind of where we're at. If I could ask the city attorney to just weigh in here at this point.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Jason Alcala, your city attorney. I think that either of those ways is sufficient for you to proceed. If you wanted to create a subcommittee, that's one way. You already have one created for the actual application process. You could also rely upon staff to circulate questions to you as the city council, which when you get to the interview meeting, you can decide among them, do you like those questions? Do you want to modify them? And do you want to allocate those amongst yourself as far as who would like to ask what? All those opportunities do exist for you as the city council. Again, I've had opportunities since I last spoke to look into my notes about closed sessions, and I do not see something that's immediately jumping out to me that would give you the opportunity to go into closed session to develop those questions. So they have to be developed by staff, yourselves individually, or collectively, in which it presents a challenge. You'd have to have that at an open noticed meeting. So. Yeah,
so we can't do it collectively. You say that a couple of us could get together and develop the oral questions.
Yes, a subcommittee could be created similar to what you have created for the interview, the formal written application process.
So I think that's our best way of doing this. Is anybody else want to volunteer for that set of questions?
Well,
Pardon?
yeah, I was going to say.
It doesn't have to be else. It doesn't, because you're right. It doesn't have to be else. I was just trying to see if that were the case, because I don't want to tag you guys if you don't want to do it necessarily. So you got the spirit here. Is who wants to do this one?
I think that I'm happy to do it, but I'm also perfectly happy to turn it over to Councilmember Carling and Councilmember Kick and just let them take it away, take the whole thing away. But
you know,
I think it's up to them. They can have the right of first refusal. Sorry, what? What was that?
I'm brand new and excited, so I'm going to take on whatever. But if Bob Carling would like to be like, I'll do one but not the other, that's totally fine with me too.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's a great way to start. Go, guys. Yay.
Okay, and I have one request, and I think, Bob, you saw it with the last time we did the planning commissioner. I think there's a natural order to the interview questions so that they flow. And if you could think about that when you're developing, it would be good. Now, it just, again, there's a total limit to the questions. And I think as what we found before, even asking questions that were on the application, very valuable. So that's so I would suggest that some of the questions that we've talked about that would show up on the application, maybe something that you would want, let's put it this way, think about including those of the application that are most important, possibly. So they're not precluded.
Right.
Does that
Just
make
because it was
sense?
asked in one place doesn't mean it might not be asked again.
Right. So does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to speak to one of the questions that we really haven't spoken to, and the more I'm thinking about it, the more it's niggling at me, and that's question 17. Will you refuse to take corporate money and answer straight to the people? Now, I find that to be a very confusing question in some way, because who's corporate money? Who are the people? How do you answer straight to the people? Aren't people like businesses part of the community, and so on and so forth? So I think a better way, but I think that the question really speaks to, can we trust you? Can we trust government in general? And I think that is, there should be some way to find a question that speaks to about building trust, about being trustworthy. What does that mean to you? Something along the, I don't quite know how to phrase it, but I think that that's actually what's at the heart of this question. That's, you know, I would not have phrased it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's a good point. And so you guys, we can come back to the details of those questions in a moment, and we can close on it. I wanted to say, as we're picking these questions, just again, Councilmember Carling's point of how many questions, and let's be reasonable here. I think, just based on my own experience 9 years ago, 20 people applied. Okay, and then 5 were selected to be interviewed. So the other thing we're talking about here is how many, and of course it depends on the qualifications and everything, but you know, a half a dozen people or so, I think we can filter based on the answers to the application, and those are fairly robust answers on that application. So I think that's reasonable. And then if you think about it, that half a dozen people, if that's the target, then you can think about on these oral questions, how many you want to ask. Now, and then I'll just, if I could, a little bit about my understanding of the process is that the people who are asked for an interview will be sequestered. The people will be interviewed one at a time, so they cannot hear what the other answers are to the questions. And then when all of the people are finished being interviewed, then they'll all come back into the Zoom meeting. Otherwise it would have been the council chambers. And then we begin our deliberations. So with the thought that there's a half a dozen, and you know, it could be easily a half hour or more conversation. So we got to just bounded by reasonableness here.
Can I ask, I mean, I understand this is going to be a Zoom public meeting on the 18th of January, right?
Yes, Maria, if you
How
could
do
flip
you-
back to the schedule.
Right, so how do you, I don't understand the process for excluding somebody while somebody else is being interviewed and preventing them from observing
Well, I think
on Zoom.
that's to be determined, but
Okay.
what I've understood is that we have plenty of individual conference rooms at City Hall, and that the people would be individual. We don't want to have, we want to honor social distancing, and so people could be observed. But you're absolutely right. I don't, you know, you hate to think about the possibility that somebody would want to cheat, but I think we'll have to take precautions, and
Not
we
so
can.
much whether or not I think they might cheat. I think the public needs to know that we've thought about this and that we're that it's fair for everybody, I think, as much
That's
as,
fair. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a good way to
It's
put it.
fair. So that if the people are isolation, it's like,
Okay.
remember the old quiz shows where you're in the isolation booth or something? I mean, that's the equivalent of that.
was
Put them in a Faraday cage so none of their
tone of
devices.
silence, right?
Right.
You have to be our age to get that one.
So I think that's the overall process. Do we, I want to make sure that staff has followed us and that we're making sense. And so we've got the global things we've talked about. And then let's ask staff that, and then let's go back and see if there are any final comments on the question set. So if I may, anybody on staff, city clerk, city attorney, city manager, or city administrator, do you want to comment? Have we got this clear enough at this point?
Mr. Mayor, I will turn it over to Mark Robertson, the city clerk, Marie Weber, to respond to you on the substance. I just want to indicate I don't believe we've accepted public comment yet on this particular item.
Good, thank you. And we'll do that in a moment. I think it was, if I could, I was thinking that the public comment could be informed by what we're thinking here because it was too vague to start with.
Honorable Mayor, given the outline that you've given, I think staff has a pretty good understanding of what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so if we could go back one last time quickly to the question set, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Hopefully the public comment has been based on what we're saying, but I understand there could also be comment of written before we started talking here, but we'll cycle back to close on what we're doing after the public comment. So any other comments on this question set that we need at this point?
I feel ready to meet with Bob C, the only Bob C now, tomorrow.
So, okay, with that, if we could go to public comment, and thank you for reminding me of that.
Mayor Warner, no comments have been received.
All right.
I'm sorry, we just received a raised hand.
Okay, good.
City Clerk's office, please unmute the raised hand.
Okay, I'm unmuting Hayden Sindhu.
Hello again. Okay. Hello again. So this was written before the question discussion, but also kind of during it. So I apologize if it goes a little off topic, but I feel that this needs to be said. I'd like to very briefly commend Councilmember Kick on adding a line to the City Council application on which applicants can place their pronouns. As civic leaders, it is important that the City Council recognize that there are people in the city who do not identify as their biologically assigned gender and would like to be referred to as what they feel comfortable with. This not only complies with the city's critical goal of making Livermore a more inclusive and welcoming city, an effort I am beyond proud to be a part of, but it also speaks to a much larger problem that we have faced for far too long. It is time to say that hatred against minority groups will not plague this city. Racism will not plague this city. Sexism will not plague this city. Homophobia and transphobia will not plague this city. And by the way, I commend Councilmember Kick on simply sitting on that virtual dais tonight. She is very likely our city's first openly queer council member, and at a time where the nation is fighting for social justice, the pieces of her shattered glass ceiling are more important than what one might think they are. This is not about being left-wing or right-wing. This is not about pointing fingers at the so-called Marxists and such, nor is it about pointing fingers at those who support or oppose the outgoing president, whose name I will not utter tonight. This is about love and unity, and it is laudable that the City Council has been and continues to take steps to make the city a more inclusive one. We are lucky that we have a City Council who cares enough about the well-being of our city and its residents that they are willing to form a subcommittee and take the backlash from those who, for whatever reason, oppose it in order to bring about this much-needed social change to our community. Shame on those who condemn these efforts, including those who have spoken against it tonight, for they are among the main reasons the Equity and Inclusion Subcommittee exists. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public?
City Clerk's Office, please read the comment received over Zoom Q&A.
This one's from Concerned Citizen. Well said, Hayden Sedun. And that's the comment.
That is
Okay.
all the comments received.
Okay, thank you very much. Close the public comment part on 11.2. Bring it back to the council. Are we, do we have enough sense of what we're doing? Everybody good?
I'm good.
Vice Mayor, okay. Do we need a, I think there's no resolution required at this point, as would be my understanding. Is that correct?
You are correct. Your direction is adequate for this item.
Okay, good. All right, with that, I'd like to move on to 11.3, council members' appointments to the intergovernmental agencies. And do we have I see we have a staff report.
Honorable Mayor, this is your City Manager, Mark Roberts, and Marie Weber, our City Clerk, is going to give us our staff report on this evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Each year, the mayor appoints council members to serve on various regional boards, commissions, and committees that require city council representatives. In the agenda packet was a roster showing the existing appointments. In addition, we received a supplemental memo from Mayor Warner regarding these appointments. Staff recommends that the council confirm the mayor's appointments this evening to those intergovernmental agencies with the to be determined positions returning at a later date.
Okay, now, if I may, do we need a resolution on that, or is it the way it's read here? It just says that the mayor make the appointments.
Yes, no, I'm sorry, Mayor. It is your appointment. No resolution is needed.
Okay, so if I may, and with this, I'll do this right now. Is there any public comment on this or item?
No comment has been received, Mayor.
Okay, so I'll open and close the public comment period. And let me just set this up. We are going to be, as we just discussed, appointing another council member in a month. And so what I've done is draw up a list based on conversations with each of you, as I'm allowed to do because it's an appointment, it's not a vote. My best understanding of the positions that you're interested in, and that there are some that we've tried to leave open for the new appointee. And so what I would say is that the spirit of this memo is is the first iteration of what we're going to do, and that we will have another round of conversations amongst all of us once we have the new appointment, and then we'll lock on it. Does that make sense to all of you? In the interim, take a look at the list I've provided and make sure that I've actually properly understood what our conversation. So if you could do that, that would be very helpful.
So sure, fine, great. I have a suggestion for if it's possible to do a screen share. We still have a number of people attending. And one of the things that I think people are generally unaware of is how many boards and commissions people are required to sit on. And just taking a really quick, being able to put that up so people can take a really quick look at that might not be a bad idea.
That's a good suggestion. And I think that what we're going to do is a more robust discussion of this when we've got the new council member. So that was the intent. So we can do that now as well. But this is, at the moment, is a preliminary list partially done. So
I have one question about the appointments. Are there any meetings happening before we get a new council member that we'll need to have someone at, even if we don't have enough bodies yet?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. We are pursuing that, and we'll get it covered.
Okay.
Some of the transitions won't be happening in that early in January.
Okay.
But my understanding at the moment, we don't have too much exposure to that, but we are double checking that list. And what we need to do is for each of those things, make sure that we understand when they're going to meet, but we will we're not going to leave something uncovered. Even if we'll get somebody there. But that's a very good point, but we are aware of it. I would ask maybe Doug Alicio what our status is on that.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
The question that Councilmember Kick brought up is that we have some TBD positions.
Yes.
And are any of those TBD positions going to meet before we appoint our new council member? And I think there's a possibility, but we have been checking on that. But I guess the question to you is, when would you be able to get back to me with assurance that we're not going to leave a opening there?
I could let you know by the end of the week.
Yes. Okay. So that's a very good point. We are been talking about it. And for those of you, I think you've all seen it, I've got a very complicated spreadsheet of trying to figure all this out and spread things around. So, but we are keeping track of everything we can there. And the city clerk's office and the city manager's office has some information on what all meetings are happening. We're consolidating everything. So good point. We don't want to miss an opportunity to interact with the rest of the community.
We're just going to point you to go to all those. That's your job now.
I'm trying to do the other thing. But yeah, I was naively thinking, oh, we can spread this stuff around. And then I look at the list and it's me and I don't have a choice. So I think that's another thing that we can recognize with what John Marchand has done. Incredible. And we didn't even mention that as much in the past meeting, how many of these things he goes to all over the place. It's quite impressive. Not only does he appear in our events in town to celebrate openings and events, but just helping assure that our interests are handled everywhere around the Bay Area. John's done a superb job. So we got it. We'll get it covered. So that's that I think is that. I'm going to get my thing. So I think we're done with 11.3.
So I'd like to just to clarify, your city manager, Mark Roberts, that the appointments that you've listed on your intergovernmental agency roster that actually have council member names in them are hereby appointed by you. And the ones that are to be determined, we will circle back and address that after we have another council member. Is that your correct direction? Yes.
And I would also just say is that it is possible that once the new council member comes on, that even some of these appointments, we might, we might think about if there's anything that would be better optimal, but I don't think there is at this point. But that's the thought, that we'll really finalize this thing on the last meeting in January.
Yes, sir.
So that's the thought there. Okay, so 11.4. Can we go on to the staff report there on the council members to the advisory bodies?
Well, Mayor, again, we'll have our city clerk, Marie Weber, give us a brief staff report on this item.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. The City Council Subcommittee on Advisory Bodies is a 2-member subcommittee of the City Council appointed by the mayor and tasked with interviewing applicants for Livermore's advisory boards, commissions, and committees. Recruitments for advisory body vacancies is managed through the city clerk's office, and interview nights are scheduled quarterly or as needed for known vacancies and to fill unanticipated vacancies throughout the year. Serving in 6-month increments, the subcommittee conducts interviews and recommends appointments for confirmation by the full city council. Tonight, staff recommends the mayor appoint 2 city council members to serve on the city council subcommittee for the period of January 1st through June 30th, 2021.
Okay, and can we have who has currently been serving on that? I believe Councilmember Carling, you've been on it for the past 6 months, is that correct?
Yes, former mayor and I have been on it.
Right, okay. Thank you. So do we have any public comment on this item?
Mayor, no public comment has been received.
Okay, so I'll open and close the public comment. So I'd like to recommend that if you guys are amenable to this, is that Councilmember Carling, you take the next 6 months, and along with Vice Mayor Monroe. I think that's what I'm thinking. Does that make sense, you guys?
Yep. Fine with me.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So that's 11:04. Now we're on to committee reports and matters initiated. So I imagine we got some rich stuff going on here too. So I've got, oh, there's one thing that I forgot to do, if I may. I'll do it under matters initiated to start with, and because there are a couple, so normally I would go last, but if I may, could I go first because I forgot something earlier? So if you'll.
You're the mayor.
All right, well, I just want to do it. So with respect to the, the committees, assignments and everything, one of the other things that we have are subcommittees of the council, and we did one on the fly now with the questions. But there's another one that I've been contemplating that I think others would can build on this, and that's why I wanted to go first. But we have a concept other than a subcommittee of a focus area that I have been discussing with the city attorney. And I would like to try that concept out. And the idea is it's something that's less formal than a subcommittee, but still allows a couple of council members to have take a lead on that topic, and that the other council members then don't all have to separately interact with staff on it necessarily to get something done. So I'd like to suggest that is the concept. I'd like to assign 2 people to one on communications. And these are 2 people that I know that are very passionate about that. That would be Brittany Kick and Vice Mayor Monroe. So, and that the idea here is, and you don't have to say yes yet until I finish saying what you're going to do, but come back with the expectations for the council that we can affirm at the next council meeting. And the idea is, how are we as a council and city, how could we advance our communications? And this is the first focus area. So I would, you'll need to also address what that means in general for us. So it's both help, work with staff, with city attorney to clarify what a focus area can and can't do. And also maybe some specifics around applying that concept to improving our communications. So that's the matters initiated. And I would like to see if both of you accept that assignment.
Absolutely. And I have something to say when Trish is done giving her answer.
Well, I don't know. Of course.
Okay.
But I did. Is this a matters initiated? Okay, so I'm just confused here. This is policy I'm questioning. So you're just, how do you make this happen if matters initiated doesn't happen until next time? I'm confused.
No, matters initiated can happen right now.
We're on item.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean, you can just create that without it coming back next month.
No. I think that was what I was trying to say. We're not creating it.
I see.
We're creating the opportunity for you guys to come back to us with what it really means, and using communications as the example.
I got it. Thank you.
So
I was confused.
All I need at this point is you guys to nod your head. because we can't really discuss it. And so if I may ask the city attorney, is what I just said allowable? Does it make sense? Any modifications you would like to suggest?
Mr. Mayor, this is your city attorney, Jason Alcala. As I understand the direction you have initiated here at Manners Initiated is you're contemplating the creation of a subcommittee to focus on communications, and you have appointed Councilmember Kick and Vice Mayor Monroe to that. They don't have any authority at this point, and it's not a formal action, but you appointed them to go away, come back with some information on communications to share with the city council at a future meeting, so that you as a council can act on that particular item on that day to see whether you want to pursue some of those recommendations or to modify them at that time.
Exactly what I meant. So is that everybody? You guys want to nod your head? Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. So since we're going to go around to the different people, can I just finish on mine and then?
Once again, you are the mayor.
Because I also believe some others might want to build on what I say, but this will be the last time that if I can help it, then I'll go first. But I made a mistake earlier, and I want to just continue here, not making mistakes, but just getting this fixed. So there's another one, because we normally have the standing agenda item on how we're doing with respect to COVID and everything. And part of that we've done in the past is on the helping the businesses. And so this matters initiated is want to propose that staff consider augmenting what we've done already with a rental assistance program, to consider that, and anything else that they think might be appropriate to help businesses. And I'd like to point out that we've got sort of 3 pots of money to consider. One is the 2 million, what's the residual of that that we haven't dispersed yet, that we did on the previous council. There is the unassigned reserve fund that could come into play. And again, that would be staff to come back and say, does that make sense? That's like 1.7 million. And then there are, I forget the term right now, but there are special revenue funds that could be applied to some of the programs that we might have. So I would just like to initiate that. It makes sense. Get the head nods.
But yeah, I think, you said rental assistance, but I would ask them to think about not just that, but other things as well.
Yeah, I think it was just an example.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so we got the head nods on that one. And the other one is something that's been is along again the lines of the COVID response, is that we've seen in LA County and in our neighboring Contra Costa County that restaurants have been engaging in legal action with respect to especially the outdoor dining. And I'd like to ask the city attorney to come back with a memo helping us understand what action is out there, and what's happening in the cases in those counties, and what schedule could we anticipate the outcomes from the court, and again, just to coordinate with the neighboring cities if possible, and just come back with a memo possibly by our next meeting. So before I ask for head nods, I'd like to ask the city attorney, is that feasible?
Certainly, if that's the direction of the council, we can reach out to our counterparts and see what information we can gather. And what we do have and what we do receive, we can then report to the city council.
So do I have a head nods on that? Okay, thank you with your perseverance here. And then the last item that has come up in the past, and I would like to see if council is okay, is over the years, we've been talking about the Carnegie Park and trying to preserve that. And, you know, out there, and we have written various letters to government agencies in support of our position on that. I've been, members of the community reached out to me and requested that we write the next appropriate letter into the state government, restating our position. So if we can get a head nods on that one. So is that clear enough, staff, what I'm asking for?
The request is that we take the direction that you previously given, including the letters that we have previously sent, and resend essentially a rewritten letter based on those previous letters. Is that correct?
Yes, and to the appropriate, at the state level, urging, you know, consideration of our position.
Very good.
So appreciate your forbearance there, and I won't go through all my list of all the great things I've done in the last, since we didn't get to do that in the council meeting, but I'll do that next time. So with that, who would, let's see, where should we start? Okay, there we go. The fastest hand raised. So, and I think that's appropriate because you might be able to build on what I just said.
Yes. Yeah, we'll see how long. I'm so excited to raise my hand, but right now I'm new, so everything's going to be exciting. So I appreciate you appointing me to this focus area because this is something that I'm very passionate about. And I think I would like to initiate a matter very specifically on creating a citywide communication policy. So I have a couple questions for staff. Mark Roberts, do we have a citywide policy on external communication?
We do not. We have policies on various parts of our communication, but we do not have an overall communication strategy across all of our communication channels.
And is this something that some other cities have that we could learn from, and rather than reinventing the wheel?
Certainly.
Okay. And then I had a question about our website. From some of my trainings, I understand that our website is going through a revamp. Do you know about when that will be launched?
Yes, in fact, we are underway, and COVID paused that. Normally one of the significant steps as you're a portion of the way through is a comprehensive retaining of our staff. Our vendor was diverted by COVID, and so at this point, we expect that process to be completed later this year, likely late summer. So we are in the preparatory phases for that switch over to our new vendor and new website, but that process still has several months left.
Okay, great. So that's good. A question for Jason as well, Jason Alcala. Could potential legal issues arise for the city without an established communication policy?
Councilmember Kick, this is your city attorney, Jason Alcala. That is possible, but it depends upon exactly what's being communicated. For example, the government code requires certain communications to be retained for 2 years or longer. Also, in certain situations, if the person speaking lacks authority to speak on behalf of the city or provides incorrect information, the city may then need to take legal steps to ensure correct information is provided. Essentially, in addition, the absence of a clear policy, staff often seek legal advice whether they can or cannot say something. So that I think that needs to be addressed by a clear and well-established communications policy.
So just to clarify, if we had a policy, it would make things easier on our staff.
From my perspective, I think that would eliminate some of the questions that we receive on a periodic basis, yes.
Okay, so my ask would be that we work on a citywide external communication policy covering all the facets. We're getting this new website. Before we go live, we should have a policy on how we engage on that website. Include traditional media like press releases. There are more laws written around that from my understanding. the law doesn't keep up with technology. And so we are a little bit behind on having a social media policy, for example. So how we interact not only with the public, but as staff, but as we interact with the public as council. So coming up with some sort of policy, I think would be important. I would like that to come back to council at some point. And then in addition to that, I think it's important that we talk about this very specifically during our norms and values. I don't know if that's something that would go here in this part of the meeting, but I think it's important that we get moving on this so that when we have these norms and values conversations, we have something to start with. I don't know if that timeline is reasonable, so please, staff, let me know, or maybe there's a separate time we can talk about this, maybe a special meeting specifically on communication norms and values.
So Councilmember Kick, might I suggest a couple of ways to move forward on this. Some pieces of the communication framework are very appropriate and actually guide council interactions with each other and with staff. And those are traditionally grouped into the norms and values meeting. The larger issue might be very appropriate for a white paper to the council as part of your goal setting to allow you to get a sense of the scale of the project, the resources necessary, and allow you to choose among and prioritize that among the other items that we might wish to be working on in the coming 2 years. So if that direction is acceptable, staff would begin to work to lay out the framework, both for your norms and values and then ultimately for a white paper for your goals.
That sounds great.
Is that meet with the pleasure of the council as well? Very good, thank you.
And I had one more. I like that we talked about how small businesses can continue to be helped in our community by looking at some additional programs. But I would specifically like to ask that maybe we look into getting a white paper on how we can have a comprehensive strategy for the next 2 years, being that this is going to have long-term effects on our community. Is there something that we are, Adam, if you are in here, is there something that we are currently working on that would impact the long-term strategy for supporting businesses as we move into the recovery phase of COVID?
Councilmember Adam Vandewater, your Director of Innovation and Economic Development. I appreciate the question. Our staff is in the process of drafting a white paper on economic recovery and resiliency for your consideration on March 1st. And it will contain short-term strategies to get us through the next 3, 6, 9 months till herd immunity and widespread vaccination, but also through the duration of your priority setting period of 2 years, what sectors of the economy we can focus on to get our small businesses back up and fully at their previous COVID productivity levels.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. So it sounds like it's already happening, so I don't need to make a request, just that we all know it's happening and we can be ready to read it before March 1st.
Okay. Great. Councilmember Carling, would you like to report out?
Sure. So on December 10th, League of California Cities East Bay Division had a luncheon that our new mayor attended, as well as Councilmember Monroe. It's kind of interesting. It was a chance to get together, and Sam Cagill, who is the leader of the East Bay Division, broke us up into chat rooms, I guess they're called, on Zoom, and I had an opportunity to commiserate about various and sundry things. So that was lunchtime on the 10th. Later that afternoon, I had a Stop Waste meeting, and I wanted to point out that every year Stop Waste presents what are called the Business Efficiency Awards, and these are efforts to recognize businesses in the county that reduce waste through prevention, reuse, recycling, and composting. And this Thursday at the upcoming Stop Waste meeting, virtually, our very own First Street Ale House will be recognized for their excellence and recycling and composting. So this is a recognition of one of our businesses in terms of Business Efficiency Award, and recognized by Stop Waste for their effort in recycling and composting. City of Livermore has been well represented in the past for these awards, and again, it's congratulations to First Street Ale House for this upcoming award. Also, on the mention on Thanksgiving, Dave Halbert, the former mayor of Dublin and the new county supervisor, and I were out at the encampment out by the creeks, passing out food with Open Heart Kitchen, and then he and I went over to Rebel downtown and spent a couple of hours there passing out meals to community members that were in need of a hot meal on Thanksgiving. They had already passed out, they being Rebel, had already passed out 60 or 80 meals before we got there. And we probably passed out 40 or 50 during the 2 hours that I spent there. But I just wanted to point out that Rebel and other, I think Pennyweight also passed out Thanksgiving meals. And I know Moni Knopp and his charitable organization passed out nearly 300 turkeys on that day. So there are a number of organizations and restaurants and businesses that are helping those in need on special days like Thanksgiving. I also point out that Rebel will be open for meals on Christmas as well. So if there are folks out there in need of a meal on Christmas, they'll also have, as I understand it, gifts under the tree for kids that are need something extra for Christmas. So again, my point being is that we have plenty of people in this community that provide a helping hand to those in need at this time of year. So congratulations to them, and hope they keep up the good work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Monroe.
Well, so as Councilmember Carling said, I attended the, as did you, attend the League of California Cities East Bay lunch. It really was a lot of fun. On Friday, so I guess it was the next day, the 11th, attended the Innovation Tri-Valley meeting on housing along with former Mayor John Marchand, and discussing the tiny homes projects. Jake Metcalf, Presbyterian Church pastor in Hayward, talked about the 6 homes that were built in Livermore at Crosswinds with HomeAid, which is the charitable arm of the housing industry. And so discussed the cost of doing so, discussed the people who are being housed there. And they pointed out that these are the working homeless that we're talking about. Someone at the DMV, who worked at the DMV, a receptionist at Kaiser, an in-care home provider. So providing housing for people who have no homes and providing ongoing housing are deeply connected. We talked a little bit about the Crosswinds Goodness Village, which will be 28 tiny homes. They will be delivered as built, and it looks like we're looking to get people moved in by February. One of the interesting points that was raised there is that there are about 38,000 potential acres in California on religious spaces that are possible, to be used in the same way. Another interesting piece that was discussed is how to build, and the idea that HomeAid is one way to do that, but they're using things like 3D printed homes, which are not quite there but are coming soon. The other thing for businesses who might be listening is that there are public-private partnerships available. So that was Friday. Over the course of the past few weeks, Mayor Warner and I have spent a fair bit of time on the Equity and Inclusion Subcommittee, working with the 4 different subgroups. And those include the culture group, which has the notes of which have created a kerfuffle, shall we say, in Livermore, but it also police and human services, a group that works with you with youth, and one that is specifically looking at economic impacts, which would include things like housing, work, and transportation. Each of those groups has a different project that they've developed over the course of the last several months. And each has met 3 times with, in the course of developing missions and values and so on. I will, the final group was the final meeting of this year was for all the groups to meet together to work on issues of storytelling. And you might say, well, why the heck would you do storytelling? And the answer to that is that while we can talk about what we look like as a city, what we feel like, we ultimately connect to each other as individuals. We have to talk to each other in ways that we hear each other. And that actually starts with telling each other's stories. And so with that in mind, we had this final group that was talking to each other and telling each other our stories. And I'll speak a little bit about that a little in a moment. I wanted to speak to specifically a piece that was raised. I'm very concerned about the idea that out of this group, there's this sensibility that the police are not being respected. And I want to make it very clear that that is not the goal of anyone in any of the equity and inclusion group. And I'm concerned that this is being raised as an issue to stop work that is actually designed to bring respect to everyone. So one of the things that I've learned over the last several months is the different ways people talk to each other about these issues. And the fact that we have different meanings that we ascribe to the things that we hold dear and the things that we condemn. And those things can be the same thing for different groups. So we've heard about the thin blue line flag, and either tonight or certainly the Black Lives Matter, actually I think we did hear about it tonight, the Black Lives Matter sign, both have raised hackles. And one of my questions as I was thinking about this is, could you imagine having both a thin blue line flag and a Black Lives Matter sign in your yard? And I actually got a letter from someone who said, well, actually, here's why I support both. So leaving that aside, I want to talk about the situation in Washington. And the reason for that is that in Washington, D.C., the Proud Boys held marches and riots in which they were fairly violent. Who was protecting the people of Washington, D.C., and who was protecting the Black churches in Washington, D.C.? It was the police. And so this is a case where we have people working together, protecting and acting as a community against people who are trying to destroy. We have to work together. We have to understand that the meanings that we hold might not, for our particular symbols, might be misconstrued on both sides. We have to listen to the people who are saying, this is what this means to me, on both sides. So with that, I wanted to tell the story that our storyteller ended with. And that is, it's an old Jewish story, because when you wake up in the morning, traditional Jews say morning prayers. Many, many religions do. Traditional Jews do this as well. And one student was asking his rabbi, who said, how do you know when it's the time for morning prayers? And they said, well, when you can tell a black thread from a white thread. No, that's not the reason. Well, when you can tell a blue thread from a red thread. No, that's not the right way. The students were stumped. They asked the rabbi. And the rabbi said, you know, it's time when you can see your own face in the face of the person that you're looking at. And that is where I would hope we could go as residents of Livermore.
So Thank you for those comments. You just flashed, so you're done at this point, I take it. So very, very well said, very heartfelt, appreciate that. So with that, I'd like to end with these comments. It was that, you know, we have to think about the season that we're in and all of the situation we've got with the pandemic and the number of people are hurting. So I would ask all of us to do what we can to help those in need. Do what we can to support our small businesses and stay safe. And with that, I'd like to adjourn this meeting to the next regular meeting on January 11th in honor of our former mayor, John Marchand, who's done such a superb job in leading us for a very long time. And we're going to miss you. So with that, we're adjourned.
Good night.
Thank you, one and all. Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
You know, we can't thank you enough for everything you've done. So,
Great.
all
Well,
right.
thank you all. Best wishes.
Good night,
Happy
everyone.
holidays to everyone.